Hey everybody, welcome back to this channel. Today we're diving into something that I find really interesting, and I think most of you are going to find really interesting as well. It's the notion of neuroplasticity, or how we can literally rewire our brain for success. So whether you are looking to make improvements in your career, in your personal growth, or in your habits, neuroscience has some really useful and important tools and lessons to teach us on how we can literally reshape our brains. I'm Dr. Alan Johnson, and on this channel, I talk about the mind, well-being, productivity, and change for thinkers, makers, and everyone in between. Now, when I'm talking about rewiring your mind, I'm not talking about something sort of hypothetical or some sort of imaginary mystical process. This is all based on real science, on real understandings of how our brain works, specifically the concept known as neuroplasticity. And most simply put, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural networks and connections all throughout our lives. Our brain is continuously reshaping itself and reforming itself. And if we allow our bad habits and bad thoughts and bad actions to take over that progress, it's going to make our mind a place that maybe we don't necessarily want to inhabit. But if we're able to consciously reflect on how these new neural connections are made in our brain, we're able to take control of them in a different way, to really develop and rewire in a brain that is going to serve us and that we find able to help us achieve everything that we want. So to begin talking about this, let's talk a little bit about what neuroplasticity actually means. For decades, well, up until really not too long ago, scientists thought that the brain structure was largely set from childhood. Obviously, we learned things and we had new experiences, but the physical, biological structure of the brain, people believed, was just kind of there. It was set from late childhood, early adulthood. But today we know that our brains are really a lot more dynamic. If you've ever heard that your brain stops developing around 19 or 20 or 21 or something like that, well, change happens at that point in time, but our brains continue to develop in new and different ways throughout our entire lives. Because neuroplasticity, that ability of the brain to reshape itself and to rewire itself, enables us to change in response to new learning, to new experiences, to new challenges. And in fact, every time we learn something new or repeat a behavior again and again, we're creating or strengthening neural pathways in our brain. So let's imagine this. If you've ever seen maybe a field in a public place, and there is a path across the grass connecting 2 points on the sidewalk that's been worn down because people just walk in that direct line regularly. It's something called a desire line. And we see it quite a lot when people don't use the sidewalk and they all follow the same path and it wears down the grass. We see it sometimes in the winter as well with snow. We see a single path cutting across a stretch of sidewalk or a field. Well, something really kind of similar happens in our brain. If we imagine every time we repeat a thought or behavior, it's kind of like we are following that desire line, that quicker route connecting two paths. And the first time we have a particular thought or behavior, the path is not going to be changed that much. The grass is still going to be growing. Maybe our footprints will wear it down a little bit, but fundamentally, no one's going to be able to tell that we just walked there. But if we keep following that path, if we keep having that same thought or performing that same behavior, we will over time wear that pathway down, creating a new pathway in our brain. So our thoughts and our behaviors literally shape the pathways in our brain. And in order to create positive change in our lives, we need to first of all be aware of that important concept. So I need to talk now about the actual biological structures in the brain. And there are two ways I want to break this down. First of all, I want to talk about the parts of the brain and the different functions that various parts of the brain play in this process. And then, secondly, and just as importantly, I want to talk about the neurotransmitters in our brain, those chemicals that, well, serve absolutely vital functions. We'll be getting to that in a second. So let's now talk about the actual structures of the brain and what is going on here. There's a lot of complexity in the structures of the brain, without a doubt, and there's lots of structures that I'm not going to be talking about today. But there are three main parts of the brain that I do want to draw our attention to because they're so important in this process of creating change in our lives. So it's the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, and the dopaminergic system. So first of all, the prefrontal cortex, maybe something you've heard of before. It's that part of our brain right behind the forehead, right at the front. And this is kind of our executive control function. This is our CEO of our entire mind and body, because the prefrontal cortex is responsible for decision making, goal setting, and self regulation. So when you're making a plan or setting a goal or focusing on some sort of new challenge, it's that prefrontal cortex which is going to be coming into action. And of course, the more you practice those skills of executive function, the stronger that area becomes. Next, I want to talk about the limbic system, specifically the amygdala. This is a tiny almond-shaped structure deep in our brain that is deeply involved in processing emotions, and particularly things such as fear and stress. So when you are going through a big change or stepping out of your comfort zone, your amygdala can jump into action and activate, making you feel really anxious, really uncertain. But of course, here's the good news. These are not all fixed. The more you face your fears, the more you practice emotional regulation, the more you can reduce the power that the amygdala has over you and make emotional responses less overwhelming. It's not about getting rid of hard or challenging emotions, but it's about learning to relate to them in a way that's a little bit different so that we're taking the fire and the heat out of them. The last part of the brain that I want to talk about is the dopaminergic system. So, dopamine is the brain's reward chemical. I'm sure you've heard of dopamine and getting a dopamine hit when you eat chocolate or go for a run. It's what makes you feel really good when you achieve something or when you experience something pleasurable. So, when you are setting goals and you achieve them, or when you have in your mind that maybe you're going to order a cheeky pizza for dinner and you get that flood of dopamine, that reward chemical. So when any of these things happen, dopamine is released and it strengthens those motivation systems in your brain. So already you can see something interesting happening here now. If you go for a run and you get a dopamine hit from that, that's going to encourage you to go for a run again. And that, of course, is a healthy habit, something that is going to support not just our body, but also our mind as well. But if you have that idea, I'm going to get myself a takeout tonight, and you get that dopamine hit, it's wearing down that desire line in your brain even more, embedding that as a valid route for seeking that dopamine hit. So I've spoken a little bit about that system that moves dopamine around, but I need to talk now about some of the other neurotransmitters that are going on in our brain. These are our brain's chemical messengers, and they play a really significant role in our personal growth. So, dopamine, as I've already mentioned, is our feel good neurotransmitter that motivates us to take action, but there's others that are just as important for our success. Serotonin, for instance, is key for mood regulation and feelings of well-being. So higher serotonin levels can be linked to improved emotional stability and resilience, which is really essential when you are on a journey of personal growth and development. There's also norepinephrine, which is tied to our focus and our alertness and to our energy. And this neurotransmitter is really crucial when we are facing challenges that require things like concentration or problem solving or pursuing new projects that interest us. Practices like physical exercise and good sleep and stress management are going to help to support these neurotransmitters to do all of the things that they need to be doing. But I'm going to get to the most important part of this video now and talk about why this is important and how we can capitalize on our understanding of brain chemistry and brain structure to create positive, lasting change. What you've probably begun to notice already is that when it comes to our brain, consistency is key. The more you repeat a behavior, a thought, or a mindset, the stronger those neural connections get. So if you are building a habit of going for a run every morning, the more you do that, the stronger those neural connections are going to be. If you build a habit of eating unhealthfully or drinking too much or sitting on the sofa rather than getting up and about and moving, that's also going to be strengthening those neural connections in your mind. So consistency is key because the brain is plastic, it's changing. And what we do and what we do repeatedly is going to become the more natural pattern for us to fall into. Part of this process is also going to involve overcoming our limiting beliefs and recognizing and confronting those limiting beliefs that we have, those desire lines in our brain, those neural connections that have been worn down from years of particular thoughts, beliefs, or mindsets. Limiting beliefs, and I'm sure you know what I mean when I say that, because we all definitely have limiting beliefs. These are often rooted in what's called the default mode network, which is a network of brain regions that become active when we're at rest. And the DMN is tied to self-referential thoughts. That's what's important here. So when we think about ourselves, those self-referential thoughts, and that's where that negative self-talk or limiting beliefs come from. There's really good news here as well, because just like any other habitual thought, belief, or mindset, we're able to retrain this. And one of the most invaluable ways that we can begin retraining that and releasing ourselves from those limiting thoughts, beliefs, and mindsets is through the practice of meditation, which teaches us how to become aware of these thoughts and enables us to go down a slightly different path in our brain. If you've not practiced mindfulness before, I'll put a link below in the chat, which will take you to my online course. That's going to be a great deep dive for really putting some of these ideas into practice. There's one other thing that I want to talk about when it comes to reshaping our mind and our lives, and that's visualization. When we vividly imagine something, our brain actually is going to start activating those same neural pathways as if we were actually performing the action. There's so much really interesting research about this. Things such as asking professional basketball players to just imagine throwing a penalty shot and seeing it get into the net, and how that compares to the actual physical practice of doing it. And what so many studies like this show is that by vividly, immersively imagining a particular scenario, a particular course of life, a particular change we want to make, we are already beginning to create those changes in our minds. Of course, this needs to be followed up with practice and discipline to continue creating those new neural connections. Because remember, if you create a desired line between two parts of the sidewalk, the first time you do it, it's not going to be that visible. But if you do it again and again and again, it's going to be worn down and it's going to become a regular pathway that you turn to every time that you need to. So, to create real, important, lasting change in our lives, we can begin to visualize it, beginning to create those neural pathways, and then strengthening them further over time through our practice, discipline, and repetition. So, this is just the beginning, but there you have it. Rewiring the brain for success isn't just a motivational phrase. When we say rewiring the brain, we're literally talking about how the parts of our brain communicate with one another and how we can change that to improve our lives and to optimize our performance. If you haven't liked and followed already, please do, because there is a lot more content on this channel coming about neuroscience and how it can improve our meditation, our well-being, our productivity, and our creativity. And if this is something that one of your friends or colleagues would be interested in, definitely share it with them, because more people need to understand how much control and ability to influence those repetitive, habitual thoughts we actually have. We're not at the mercy of our limiting beliefs or repetitive habitual thoughts. We are, bit by bit over time, able to make some real, significant, lasting change. I'll see you next time.